we're doing. We're taking different geographic areas like in Louisiana and Texas, even in Virginia and Mississippi, and we got restoration plots there where we're doing the same thing. And the trees down in Texas are going to be different than the trees along the coast of Delaware or North Carolina. And so we're being real sensitive to that breeding program. And so me and Leslie are actually leaving here. When the meeting's done, we're going down to some trees in Texas. And we're putting screen wire covers on to make sure the squirrels don't get them. And some of those are going to you, and so it's a good thing. So this is an excellent, excellent thing that we're making happen right here. Okay, so I'm next person up. Okay, thank you.
And I'm going to turn this over to my daughter. Hopefully she didn't put too much stuff in here, but I'm going to let her do my introduction for me. Leslie.
Hi guys, how is everyone? I'm excited to get to introduce our next speaker, which is my dad, Steve Boss. A little bit about Steve. He's married to his wife, Angela, for 40 years, and they have 4 wonderful children. I am one of those children. They have their home in the countryside outside of Poplar Bluff, Missouri. Steve is also the president and founder of the Ozark Chinquapin Foundation. Since 2007, his nonprofit organization has been dedicated to saving and restoring blight-resistant Ozark Chinquapin trees back to their native range. He worked for Missouri State Parks for 26 years, doing hands-on nature and history programs for park visitors, certified fire crew leaders, writing burn plans, and doing prescribed burns, eradicating non-native plants, and restoration of native plant and animal communities. He worked for 15 years with Walmart, and the last 5 years as a store manager. He has 2 degrees. One is a Bachelor of Science from Southeast Missouri State University, and a second is a bachelor degree in Social Studies from Arkansas State University. He's taught history and science for 5 years. Since 2005, he's worked with private landowners, state, federal, tribal agencies, and university partners to find, save, and restore remnant surviving Ozark Chinquapin trees. He's done interviews promoting the Ozark Chinquapin tree on television, newspapers, podcasts, magazines, and in 2019 with National Geographic magazine online. However, he believes his most important job is to be a good dad and husband. And I can attest that he excels in at least one of those. He believes one person can make a huge difference and has come to realize that we never fully understand the impact that we have on other people or the world around us. The forests we have today are different from the forests our grandparents enjoyed. However, if we work together, we can make them a better place for wildlife and our children to inherit. So without further ado, welcome Steve Boss, the next speaker.
We do have one little change on the agenda, and Robert, I'm going to need you, if you look at the native range of the trees, that's a short little time right there. And can you go ahead and tell us about what you're doing with the Nature Conservancy? Is that enough time for you? Yeah. Okay, that's this afternoon is what it is. Yeah, if that's okay with you. Okay, glad to have everybody up here, and we'll see if I can make this thing work. And so let me go back one. Boy, AJ.
One on the left.
On the left. Oh, there we go. Okay. Very good. Okay. So out on a limb, saving an American treasure. We used to think this was an Ozark treasure. Now we know they had a much larger range. And so what I want everybody in this room to do is keep in mind that, you know, we, like Leslie said, we don't realize how we can influence the world around us, good or bad. And when you take your children and you get them in the outdoors, or if you sit around the dinner table with them and you talk, or if you go on vacation, guess what? They will never forget that. Studies have been done and proved that. And so this is my son right here. And AJ, I'm pushing right and it's not going, oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, so one person that really influenced me on the Chinquapin trees was a gentleman that passed away right at 100 years of age. And he actually told me some things I'd never heard before. He was talking about how delicious the Chinquapin nuts were, and you'd wait for them to fall like you'd wait for a crop of corn to ripen. And just like Edwin said, they were everywhere, they were real abundant, and now very few people even know about these trees that were here at one time. And so so Edwin was talking about loading in Chinquapin logs in a wagon, and bringing them back. But you guys probably picked them up on a big scale, I'd say, just like this, load them in a wagon maybe, I don't know. But they were that abundant and they were that dependable, and the deer, bears, squirrels, turkeys, a variety of wildlife would fatten up on the nuts that ripened and fell every year. Starting in the 1950s and 60s, they were all dying off. And let's see, I don't know if I'm not where this is at. There we go. I think I'm not right by the sensor. Now the trees are all gone, no one has heard of them. So this person really influenced me, and I began to research and try to find out what I could. And when I was in college, I was first majored in forestry, and there was no one that I knew that were about my age that knew anything about this tree. And so the Ozark Chinquapin tree, sometimes called Ozark chestnut, or Ozark, or just Chinquapin, grew to about 65 feet tall, 2 to 3 feet in diameter, and they were up on the hillsides and on the slopes. They were in well-drained sandy or rocky soil, and the trees were a bounty of sweet nuts that fell every year and was sought after as a nutritious food source by humans and wildlife. And the wood was highly prized. It was very rock resistant, and it was a favorite for railroad ties, especially for wet areas. This is a picture of an old log in Oregon County, Missouri, and it's 101 degrees when I set the tripod up and made that picture. And we've got two members of the Cherokee Nation back here. You want to raise your hand up back there for us, okay? And there's a gentleman that a friend of mine told me about that was in the Cherokee Nation, and Tino Burnett, and I called him up and told him about what I was trying to do to save these trees. And he told me on the phone, he said, I wish we could save this tree, but he said, I'm afraid I'm going to die, and no one will ever know what this tree was. So long story short, I sent him seed and grow tubes, and he went out with his grandchildren, planted those trees on a hillside, and those things are growing today. And so that is just a big accomplishment. He was also on our board of directors until he passed away, and he was also a Cherokee warrior. He was in World War II. And so this whole thing that we're doing is great and awesome. And a little bit later on, we're going to learn a little bit more about how the Cherokee Nation is doing a lot of things to bring back their language and bring back also the culture and for their children, and also important plants like the Ozark Chinquapin. Ryder, you want to hold your hand up back there? Okay. And see how we got a real good meeting for everybody. So what happened to the trees? Well, to be able to actually understand this, you need to see what happened to the American chestnut. And this is a real famous picture. You can see real large American chestnuts. They look like big redwood trees. And so what happened, there's a blight that came over from Asia, and they first spotted it in 1904 in the Bronx Zoo in New York. However, it's probably here earlier than that from what we know. But anyhow, this fungal disease began to kill the trees out. And if you look on the left up here, I think we got a pointer right here, you can see that's an American chestnut, and that gentleman right there is Jeff Deaton. And you're going to learn a little bit more about him before the day's over with. So there's the American chestnuts. So these trees went from billions to almost zero. And today, if you're lucky and you got an opening in the forest like there is here, where the sunlight comes in, you'll sometimes have the sprouts come up and they'll die back from the blight. And where's C.D. Scott at? C.D., do you remember this?
I do.
He took me out and showed me the very first Chinquapin tree I'd ever seen, and it's a tree that book authors said, you're wasting your time, they're gone. And I kept looking, and CD proved them wrong with that one trip in the pouring rain we went out on. It was unreal. So this is a real awesome map that A.J. Hendershot put together, and this is spread the chestnut blight. And it will reach the Ozarks, in different areas, maybe sooner than others, but by the 1940s and 50s, it will make its way west of the Mississippi River. And so here again is that one tree, and so There's blighted stump sprouts, and today, it doesn't matter if you're with National Park Service or Arkansas State Parks. How many of y'all have done burns? See a show of hands? Okay, a lot of us have. And so the tree at one time loved fire. It got rid of the leaf litter, which made it good for them. They don't like organic matter whatsoever in the soil. But today you've got a scenario like this where you have a blighted stump sprouts where they keep coming back again and they die. So you have an immediate proximity of dry fuel, you got green sprouts. And so when fires sweep through an area like this, you'll lose your stump sprouts. And so the logging practices and later the chestnut blight, Cryphonectria parasitica, would wipe out the Ozark Chinquapin. Today only blighted stump sprouts remain in this once important tree. And about every 4 to 6 years that cycle will repeat itself. And if you look over here on the right, you can see this characteristic twist of the wood. And it's a real drought tolerant tree, but the wood is rot resistant. And you can see right here, here's an extra punch that this tree had to set it back. Look, if you look real closely at those leaves, you'll see those leaves are completely eaten up by Asiatic oak weevils, an invasive insect that we got. And so this tree has had a lot going against it. In Missouri, we had one of the largest timber mills in the country. So everything was cut down and then it was burned, and Missouri led the nation in erosion. Here's a log slide right here. So our forests have changed a lot. They've been logged over. And here's an old picture from 1907, 1908, and this shows the part of the range. And this is supposed to be for Pamela, which is actually a bush, but we've got the Ozark Chinquapin range within it, and we're going to show you a little bit more on that later, the true range of it. And it's kind of interesting. There was a lot of misnomers about what Chinquapin tree was, and there's some people today, if you look, this is a big tree in Louisiana, and they were growing there as well too in that sandy ground. And I forget the date on this article here though, but I think the last Grand National Champion in Louisiana was in the 1970s. So anyhow, it went from a big tree like this to a shrub-like status that constantly gets blighted and doesn't make nuts. But at one time, the tree was very important to people and wildlife. And so this is just kind of the stuff that we run into. And Chris White, where are you at? Chris White is incredible. He's gone in and ran these old newspaper articles all the way back from before the American Civil War, and we got all these neat things about Chinquapin trees and where they were at. So Chris was able to give us a snapshot about what was real common back then. Another real common thing you see is the fact of how important wild food was to people. You know, the newspaper articles would talk about, they'd say pawpaws are ripe now. Folks, this is back in the days when you couldn't go to the store at Walmart and get bananas. And so people ate food like that, persimmons, muscadine, wild grapes, and just like, Edwin was talking about, hunting was a big part of it too, and gathering food, just like Native Americans did. And so a lot of people today don't understand that, but there's a lot of people, though, that are going back to this. Well, with the trees becoming so rare, how many of y'all been to Cossatot State Park? Anybody been there? Okay. And a real beautiful park not too far from here. Well, a lot of people trying to do some really well-intended work to try to save the trees. I talked to a gentleman and down by Cossatot, this is a gravel mine. And this is the only last known Ozark Chinquapin. Look how big that tree is. And it was right at the entrance of that gravel mine. And they spent, believe it or not, over $30,000 trying to excavate this tree up and load it onto this flatbed truck. They had good intentions. And you can see them going down the road here with it. And of course it got knocked around, banged around, it didn't make it. And so this is what we're running into. And so with the Ozark Chinquapin Foundation, we're science-based, as well as boots on the ground, getting out there and trying to do this work. And AJ, if you don't care, when I've got 10 minutes left, if you can make that 10-minute sign for me, and I'm going to try to scoot along. So how important was the tree? Well, it's an important keystone species for people and wildlife and rare ecosystems where it occurred. And so it's a consistent nut crop every year, high-protein food for wildlife and people. Large nut crops, and like Edwin was saying, they would just cover the ground, and we keep seeing that and hearing that time and time again. They made so many nuts. And on some of our research test plots, we're actually have seen this already, and it's a great thing. Grew on well-drained, rocky or sandy soil, very drought tolerant. However, it's not as drought tolerant as we thought before. I'd back it up a little bit, and I'd say that the oaks are probably more drought tolerant. Would you, AJ? Chris? Can't see Chris's face. You think so too, Chris? Oaks are more drought tolerant? Okay. And so yeah, blooms in late May, early June after frost, and the wood's very rot resistant and produces nuts in 3 to 5 years, and this is something that we did not know before, and widespread and common occurrence. And so this is kind of interesting. If you look at this picture on the left, this is a witness tree. And AJ, do you remember the phone conversation we had about this? You looked it up, and they said it was a pin oak, correct? It's a Chinquapin, Ozark Chinquapin. So a lot of times when they were doing surveys, they didn't get their trees right. And this is in a picture of Missouri. So a lot of people went in, they would actually cut down the trees. And Terrence, where are you at? So Terrence, some of the trees that you had that Peter took you to, it had all even-age sprouts coming off of it. And I first thought, well, those were blighted, but it wasn't. Somebody had cut that tree down for that Chinquapin log. And you've got that on your program, I think, don't you? Okay, good. And so anyhow, so it went from a large tree, and so a lot of times if you don't have a record on your witness trees, or they get it wrong, then it looks like the tree wasn't there. So these are just newspaper articles telling about kind of interesting little snapshot back in time. So September 6, 1917, the Monticellian, am I saying that? Monticellian, okay, in Monticello, Arkansas. And so they're talking about, up here about, you know, other record-breaking crops this year. And they're talking about large, heavy crops of nuts, Chinquapins, walnut, hickory, and oak. Thousands of hogs will fatten up in the woods this fall, but even a large part of the mass will go to not go to waste. Will go to waste. Will not be enough hogs to eat them up. So they weren't even thinking about the wildlife. So these are just old articles. Here's one from October 4th, 1954, the Madison County Record in Huntsville, Arkansas. Just talking about the price of them, and then people talking about going out and gathering Chinquapins here. It was just a real common occurrence to see this and have it. So I began to think, well, you know, where are these trees at today? You know, and I would talk to book authors about it. And so this is what I was met with when I would ask them, where are they at? Is there any out there left? And I had people that were book authors and experts. They just told me, you're wasting your time on a ghost hunt. The tree no longer exists. Well, on that first trip, out on that pouring down rain, C.D. Scott changed their minds right there. And so had I believed them and stopped, I would not be standing here today, and we wouldn't be in this room. And so, you know, when people tell you something, it's always based on the best information. Here's a tree in southwest Missouri, and I wish this picture was wider. You could see burn scars all over all these trees. But this Chinquapin, they will grow about about 1/2 to 2/3 of an inch a year, and they'll heal very quickly over fire scars. And here's another one in southwest Missouri, never did get the blight. And here's one, the state champion in Mississippi. And here's another one in southwest Missouri. And here's one in Alabama. And here's one on with the National Park Service. And in fact, let's see, we got C.D. Scott right there too. So I didn't do this on purpose. You're just a part of this whole restoration, and talking to you inspired me and got me going on this. So here's a large one. This is Jeff Deaton and his family being here a little bit later on. We're actually going to give him an award for all the great stuff he did. Folks, this was tree number 1 in our database, significant tree that had blight resistance. And here's one in Texas that we got. Here's champion trees in Virginia. I mean, in North Carolina too, the mountains of North Carolina, they've got them. They're dead ringers for what we have here in Missouri. We even have them in Delaware, and I'm just amazed. There's thousands of nuts on trees in Delaware, and we have reason to believe there may be, I'm going to say, more than a 50% odds they are in New Jersey, and also, and I'm stretching my neck out, but this is based on what we're finding, also Pennsylvania. And folks, do you see what this says? Texas, all the way up to Maryland, and Delaware and Pennsylvania. That's a very large range and comparable to, if not a little bit larger than the range, historic range of the American chestnut. And so we came up with a recovery action plan: find the trees, collect the seeds, pollen and grass, and do a DNA testing, preserve the genetic diversity of the native range, and cross-pollinate surviving trees with desirable traits, and then inoculate the finished crosses with blight, and then the science and genetics and hypovirulence, raise public awareness and outreach like what we're doing here today, and then raise money for the projects. You got to have money to be able to make things happen. Then dedicated locations in and out of the blight range, and seed out to members for reintroduction. We've been doing that. And so expand the restoration to state, federal agencies. You can't see it, also tribal agencies. And for over 15 years of field and laboratory work, our mission has been to create a blight-resistant Ozark Chinquapin tree and preserve the genetic diversity of the native range. And I'm here to tell you that we are successful. We have done it. And so we've been actually, if I go back on this one, this is female flowers in bloom, and we've been doing controlled pollination, and just by luck, some of our best trees are planted by each other, and the limbs intercross, so there's a real high confidence that we actually have good crosses with good genetics from the wild. And so we test them, and then after we test them, we cross them again. So this is pollen from Ozark Chinquapin trees that we have frozen anywhere from plus or minus 2 degrees Fahrenheit. And so we've mastered a lot of things. We tried to pollinate trees, same way the American Chestnut Foundation does, and it does not work with the Ozark Chinquapin. We had to develop our own method, and way back in the day, Steve Churchill and Chris White, Noah, and Sean Smith, all of us, we did a lot of work on it, and we had success with it. So this is one of the restoration plots in Missouri. If we had time, I'd show you a little video of what that looked like 8 years. These things are just loaded with nuts. And so here we are, one of the trees right here that's still real small, a 3-year-old tree, if I remember right, that's actually making nuts. So surprising. So success. We've got, it's a reality that we have blight-resistant nuts and trees today, and they've got all kinds of good properties, are resistant to, by default, I guess the Asiatic, I'm sorry, let me get this straight. By default, they're resistant to Phytophthora cinnamomum, which is the rot root disease, and it's playing havoc with a lot of American chestnuts, and we've missed that one. And also the Asiatic gold wasp, and we're immune to it just like the Chinese chestnuts are. So whenever we find a big tree like this, we're real happy. And our mission of the Ozark Chinquapin Foundation, we're a nonprofit organization, outdoors men and women, with a vision of restoring the Ozark Chinquapin back to its native range. And through our efforts and those of hundreds of volunteers over the last decade, blight-resistant Ozark Chinquapin trees and seed are now a reality. And we are now in the restoration phase of our mission and restoring 100% pure blight-resistant Ozark Chinquapin trees back to their native range. And if I could send up a bunch of balloons right now and shoot off fireworks, I would do it. This has been a Herculean accomplishment. It took all of us to do it. And how many of y'all have planted trees or collected nuts or done any kind of research, field research, taken pictures, videos? Raise your hand if you've done that. Okay, with that hand still raised in the air, reach behind you and pat yourself on the back. This is a group project. This is something we can all be proud of, but we've got more work yet to do, and I don't want us to pat ourselves on the back too much. That's why you had to reach around like that. And we've got more work to do, and these genetics in places like in North Carolina in the mountains, high elevation, around 3,000 feet elevation, are completely different than what we have right here in this part of Arkansas. We need to be really sensitive to that in our breeding program. And we have a responsibility, I feel like, to do that. Okay, so higher calling, this is our meeting at Mountain Magazine right here, and everybody here and everybody in all the meetings that we had, you didn't come here because we're giving out $100 bills, except for my daughter, but for saying what she did. But This is just a great thing to be a part of. And in the news today, if you hear what's going on, I mean, this is good stuff. You know, pick a better thing to be involved in. Okay, 10 minutes to go. Thank you. So what have we learned right here? I'm going to move along on this. So Leslie has done a lot of great work on research, and she has pushed our work ahead easily 10 to 15 years. And she is used to, she would do the leaf testing where we would inoculate them and with blight, and we moved forward on that, and now you know, we've got a lot of good information from that. Now we're moving forward, we're using oxalic acid test, so we can actually collect the leaves and check for resistant, and then we compare it to Chinese chestnut. And so she will actually go out and take a leaf and cut little circles, looks like with a hole puncher, and then we'll test them. And folks, if you look right here, this is Chinese chestnut, and the disease came from Asia, you know, on Asiatic different types of Chinquapin and chestnut. And so some of our trees, you know, have lower resistance than that. But look at this, we've got a lot that are even better. And this is an older chart. Right now, we have some trees that actually have tested anywhere from 18 to 21% more blight resistance than Chinese chestnut. And so it's a great accomplishment. And so we're doing a lot of work in the lab. A little bit later on, we have a PhD student here from Missouri Botanical Garden. Where you at? Okay, very good. Okay. And she's going to go ahead and do a presentation for us. And Missouri Botanical Garden and her team have done some great work, and she's going to share with us some in-depth research that we're doing. And in fact, I've got some new samples from you from North Carolina and Delaware and Virginia. I didn't bring them up here. I want to come up and give them to you guys up there. I didn't have time to finish them before the meeting here, though. So we've got, right now, we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 115 to 120 samples. And how many of y'all in this room have turned samples in for this study? Okay, we got several people. So this is kind of good, what you've been doing research on, some of the people that found those trees and collected them and got them to you in good shape are right here in this room. So this is a good thing. So anyhow, so Leslie's done a lot of work on this, and it's very labor intensive, and it's been like our GPS that guide us to where the better trees are at, and we continue to test them and improve the genetics on it. And if you look over here at these stars, these are some really good ones. And so these best of the best is what we're focusing on. And surprisingly, those are some of the trees that have better drought tolerance, and they also make a lot more nuts. And so it's just a win-win thing. And don't get me wrong, we've also actually produced some really bad trees. We produce some that get the blight and die from it on our research test plots, and that's okay. We've got some of them that can't handle the drought. We've got one research test plot that we get a lot of our nuts off of, and it gets about 1/2 the rainfall from the other geographic area due to a deep valley by a river right by it. But that's part of it, and if we lose some, we learn from it, and we move on, and then we share those with everybody in the room and our other research partners that we have. And so Leslie Boss Carter's laboratory findings were also confirmed, a separate lab study by scientists at the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry in Syracuse, New York. Their laboratory research reveals some of our Ozark Chinquapin trees have significantly higher blight resistance than the genetically modified Darling 58 American chestnut tree that's required thousands of dollars spent on its development, if even millions. And so anyhow, I'm going to move real quick on this. So in Delaware, we've got villages, and they don't go by Delaware, they go by the name Lenape. And these are Lenape villages, and there's still some Lenape up there today. And I was able to go and see some of this, and you know, this was just part of their food, and we sent samples of those into you as well. And am I saying this correct? Is it Maya? Maya. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, Maya. Okay, I want to make sure I'm saying that correctly. And so Maya, when I first told them we had some samples from Delaware, they thought, no way. But then we've got others from Virginia right by you, Maryland right by that same area, and I'm glad that we're able to get those in a quick dry gel for you as well too. And so the native range of the trees is actually much larger, and this is an older map. Me and AJ has done a fantastic job putting this together. We've got more places, so if you were to wrap a belt around that, these are just the known locations. And missing from here, Leslie found out we've got 3 or 4 places confirmed in Illinois that are contemporary, or that we have Ozark Chinquapins at. Leslie found some from the early 1900s and the 1800s, and even from the 1700s in Illinois. And then I did some research work, and I found out, and I think it's enough, AJ, that I can say with confidence that they were in Kentucky, because that's what they're saying at their websites, in forestry and conservation. Same in Tennessee, and the same in West Virginia as well too. And look down here, even into Florida. So the native range was much larger than what we thought. And so we did a lot of DNA work on them. There's genetic differences on the range from the north part, above the Arkansas River and below it. And like I said, we're being sensitive to that. I don't want to put you in a coma and go over all this stuff right here. I just switched past that one. But from way back, and I guess about 2008, we've been having DNA tests done. And so in the DNA tests, you get different information. And Maya and her team are doing DNA and also molecular studies, which dives real deep into the genome, just kind of like me in 23. In 5 minutes. Okay, so look how rocky this ground is right here. So we've done a lot of creative things. This is a food product. We don't want to send out nuts for people to eat that's we use Roundup on, or some kind of ortho or something along that line. So I came up with organic spray where we use garlic and pepper and even cinnamon, and after I spray that stuff up there, it smells like a good Mexican restaurant. So anyhow, we've come a long ways. Big surprises. A real unique phenomenon is the bloom cycle that happens in the forest. And here's a red bat that's staying up in a tree waiting for the night shift to start. How many birders we got again? Okay, so whippoorwill populations have declined about, I'd say 71% since the 1960s. And if you can't see this, I know, but me and Leslie doing work at night trying to pollinate, we came across whippoorwills on their nest. And if there's enough food, like you'll have during this bloom cycle, with real large beetles and moss, the female will let the male take over the nest and start another nest. And so we run across this up on our plots where we have a lot of Chinquapin trees. I love this picture. This is from John James Audubon in before the 1850s, and this is a yellow-throat warbler, and look where it's at, up in a Chinquapin tree. Well, here's Hobbs State Park, the return. Here's a yellow-throat warbler today on the Chinquapin. Yay! Eating the insects on the bloom. That is a conservation success. And so anyhow, all kinds of surprises. We have a bee thought extinct. A chestnut bee was found in Connecticut. This wasn't just one of them. There were several of them. And I think it even made it into an article in National Geographic, if I remember correctly. And so a bee that thought disappeared was found on not American chestnut, but on Ozark Chinquapin. And so we're doing all kinds of research. Steve's going to share a little bit with Olivia with you later on some of the studies that we're doing. So the King's Hair Streak butterfly, we've got a lot of them. This one was found, and there's maybe less than 30 or 40 of these have been found since the 1920s, since the blight came through. But this King's Hair Streak, though, was found and verified at Mount Magazine State Park. And so we've got help. Remember the leaves are chewed up? Well, we've got northern parula, and I've watched them when I've been out on our plots, and they'll glean every insect off of them, but they won't get below 10 feet. So if you'll see from the ground level up to about 10 or 12 feet, you'll see leaves eaten up by the Asiatic oak weevil, and above that, the birds take care of it. Well, here's the reason if they don't go below 12 feet. This is a bobcat, and I see bobcats practically every day on these plots. There's another one. And so we don't try to kill them or get rid of them or trap them out. We're wanting to see how the wildlife reacts to it. So the birds that come in for the blooms alone is just absolutely incredible. And it lasts for a long time. And so even on the night shift, we've got one screech owl here that's gulping down either a mouse or a rodent or a pack rat, probably a mouse or a young pack rat. And then here's another one taking off for another. At the night shift, this place is busy, and here's a barred owl trying to catch a flying squirrel. And so here's wintertime. Here's blue jays. They learned how to use those long beaks. The beaks are longer than needles, and so they are picking out the chinkapin nuts in the winter on birds that were blown down in summer storms. And here's here's a summer tanager, and here's from a trail camera. This is a yellow warbler, and here's common honeybee. And so rapid growth and ability to coexist with today's pests and pathogens. And so this tree right here, this is a 3-year-old tree that I planted, and I thought it was wrong habitat. This way is east, this way is to the west, and I thought this is not a good location because the tree is shaded on the ground after about 1 o'clock. Folks, this is the best place, facing east, where you have protection, and that tree today is very large. It's right at 10 inches DBH. Here we go, 47 nuts on one branch, and that's pretty common when you have a good pollination period where there's not a lot of rain. Here's protein analysis. Look at this. Ozark Chinquapin, 15.2%, white oak, 4.6%, scarlet oak, 4.2%, American chestnut, 5 to 8%. We beat all those. Folks, this is our native tree we're talking about here. And so we have visitors. And so I was out, this is a ladder, I was up collecting nuts, and here's a female black bear. And, I sprayed that pepper spray on the ground, and I was not in any big hurry to get back up there because the bears wouldn't bother, or so I thought. Once they have a taste of chinkapins or squirrels, the pepper spray does not work. I'm going to tell you. Don't ask me how I know. And I don't think I have it. I had another picture with that bear. Actually, I've got a video, and it walks right under that third rung of that ladder. And so just so you know, I'm not telling a big Wendy right here. This is where that third rung comes to me. So that's a very large female black bear. And if you notice, she has no cubs with her because that year before, there was no nut crop. And so unless there's a nut crop that falls, they will abort all the fetuses and there'll be no baby bears born. And that's all over the United States. So this tree making nuts every year is very important. And so here's some more protein analysis. Look at the Ozark Chinquapin here compared to white oak, American chestnut, even the Dunstan and Chinese. Folks, this is our native tree. If this is not a project worthy of our best efforts, in my opinion, there are none. Wild turkeys, anybody here turkey hunt? They love chinkapins. They love them. And I don't know if you can count how many deer there are here. There's actually 7 in there. And the pepper spray is worn off enough, and they're coming in there going after them. And I'm not telling you which plot this is by. And here's some RPM trees that we have. This is rapid growth, and this is our potted trees. And so some are over 5 feet tall, and this was in the month of June and or May. And then we had pollen and nuts on them. Not nuts, but we had pollen and female flowers on them. A lot of work. Here's me and my son caught on a photo, and we have to carry everything into some of these restoration plots, carrying water in. Then we have water tubs. We have to be resourceful. And here's a tree that's never been watered. And I'm sorry, this tree was planted, and I put 2010. That's not correct. That was planted in 2012, and that tree is right at 10 inches DBH now. And so we mailed out a lot of seed. And over the years, I'd say we probably safely mailed out over 38,000 seed, every one, including a lot of people in this room. Just a lot of work to do. And when you have the roots look like this or this, they will take off like gangbusters, usually. Usually, they can be tricky to start, I'm going to be honest with you. But just a lot of good work with Arkansas State Parks. And Chris is smiling like a possum right here because we got that electric fence put in, and we've got one plot right here. This is our first restoration plot, and Chris will tell you a little bit later on. This restoration plot is right by a surviving tree and remnant population here. So it's our first plot that we planted, and that was in 2020, in immediate proximity to the remnant population still there. And we got our first nuts off of those trees. The first one last year, we got even more this year. Folks, that's a huge conservation success right there, and I'm just tickled to death to be a part of it. Lots of restoration partners in Missouri. We got the National Park Service with us, And so this is what a conservation success looks like. These are the crew. Everybody in Arkansas Forestry, raise your hands up. Yay, yay. And good job on it. This is great. So this is, and here's some sprouts that have come up on their own. They're the Chinquapins. I don't know how they survived. Everything's trying to eat them, but about every one of those was under a rock. And let's see. So the forests we had today are different than the forests our grandparents had. However, if we work together, we can make them a better place for wildlife and for our children to inherit. And the second picture coming up, well, this first one right here is me in the bear's den getting the cub out of there. And we tranquilized the mama first. I just didn't go in there. And this is my son when he was about 4 or 5 years old. He probably knows more about a Chinquapin than, or knew more back then than any 4-year-old I know of. And so anyhow, that's the end of my program. Did I do okay? Okay, and let's see.